One of the methods used is, of course, through the Belt and Road Initiative. China has been building infrastructure. The multinationals who went out of the US and EU to global South, for cheap labor, they did not build infrastructure. They did not build railways, power plants, roads, and so on. So this is the very crucial difference between the Chinese globalization and the previous globalization.
Well, I think that there is some similar logic behind all these, but the ultimate goal, the purpose is totally different. While when China's enterprises are going out to help to install their production capacities in those countries, intentionally, we will help those countries to get industrialized. We think that we should share our experience with those global South countries. Our purpose is that to create a wealth beyond China. And then, if that's Chinese philosophy, for thousands of years, China used to be a Confucian country. While for Confucius said previously, more than 2,500 years ago, if you want to get wealthier, better get your neighbors wealthier also. And then you can get wealthier with each other.
Hello and welcome to a new webcast from the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. My name is Hussein Askari. Today is March the 12th, 2025. Today we're going to take up the second episode of our coverage of this important meeting of the two sessions of the Chinese National People's Congress and also the consultative conference. In the last episode, we took up how important that is for China's foreign policy with Mr. Einar Tangen. And today we're going to discuss the importance of the two sessions, the kind of decisions and discussions which were taken up on China's economic policy, China's economic development, and also China's future economic policies and how they will impact the world economy. And to do that, we have today, we are honored to have with us Professor Ding Yifan. He's a renowned economist in China. He's the senior fellow at the Global Governance and Development Institute at the renowned Renmin University. He's also a former deputy director of the influential Institute of World Development under the State Council's Development and Research Center, which is a very important advisory body to the government on economic development issues. Thank you, Professor Ding, for taking the time to be with us today. We are very happy to have you.
Thank you for inviting me for this very interesting dialogue.
Thank you. It's exactly 1 year ago we had our last interview. Of course, I met you in Beijing twice last year privately, but last year we discussed the first part of your very important book called New Dynamics of Development, The Crisis of Globalization and China's Solutions, which was published 2023, which dealt with a lot of the China's economic philosophy of development, but also how it has shifted along time, especially since the global financial crisis 2008. And you also explained a lot of this confusion about China's economic slowdown and
yes.
going from high quantity 10% growth to high quality 5% growth. So I'm sure today our audience will benefit much more today to understand not only what China's policy is today, what has been discussed at the two sessions, but also we have a very precarious situation in the world economic system.
Yes, the world economy.
We have seen a very sharp downturn in the U.S. stock markets, which President Trump himself says this is the benchmark of his success. We don't believe that stock markets are a benchmark, but President Trump already was very proud that the U.S. stock market was going up. Now it's going down. We have a very extreme trade war, a tariff war, not only with China, but also with Canada now developing. And it's causing a lot of turmoil in the internal American economy, but also it will have impacts. If there's a recession in the United States, if there's a recession in the EU, it will impact everybody, including China. And I think this is one thing which the Chinese Premier Li Qiang took up in his work report to the two sessions conference. And therefore, we will start by Professor Ding is, first of all, what were the most important outcomes of the two sessions in terms of the economic policy of China and how China is dealing with its own internal challenges, but also with external challenges, which Premier Li Qiang said headwinds, external headwinds. So please let us know what you think about the outcome of the two sessions in terms of the economic policy.
Thank you. Actually, what is important is the task of government works that Premier Li Qiang had just underlined in his speech. Every year, the Prime Minister will make a report on government works for the previous year and to launch a project of public policy to guide the development in China for the coming year. So this year, Premier Li Qiang had set the target of economic growth at 5%. While with the external headwind, so the 5% of growth will be very, very a high bar. It's a very from the global perspective, the global economic growth environment is not favorable. So global trade is in decline. And the red line is somehow in a lot of countries, even you just mentioned the United States, because a lot of people are concerned that with those tariff war, with those tensions between those the main trading partner of the world. So the U.S. economy might be going into a sort of recession. It's imminent. It becomes imminent. And the recession could trigger a slowdown of the stock market. Well, as the U.S. economy depends much more on the stock market strength. So if the stock market goes down, that will trigger the economic downturn in the U.S. Well, U.S. have a lot of implications with Europe, with Asia, with all these economies. All these will have a negative impact even on China. But hopefully, Premier Li Qiang just pointed out that China have prepared. China have prepared for this kind of a worst scenario. So he's confident that this year we will reach the target of 5%. And Chinese government have prepared a very cautious plan to reach this target. For example, China have raised its budget deficit. Traditionally, China always trying to keep the budget deficit around 2% or below 2% of its GDP, while this year, Chinese government projects a budget deficit at 4%, slightly higher than the criteria of Maastricht Treaty. See, look at the history. China is the good disciple of Maastricht Treaty because his government budget deficit has never surpassed 3% of GDP, and its public debt, its national public indebtedness, and even its local governments, its provincial governments' debt level put together has never surpassed 60% of China's GDP. That's all these criteria of Maastricht Treaty. of the European Monetary and Economic Union.
Yes, but
So, well, in Europe, in
yeah, but
Europe,
in Europe
no country respects it so strictly. Only
right.
China sticks to those criteria nowadays.
Exactly. But in China, they don't consider this 3% as a religious thing. You know,
No, no, no.
it's sometimes necessary. In Europe, we are crippling ourselves because we have, in a religious manner, have to stick
Uh-huh,
to this 3%. We cannot do public investments by raising
uh-huh.
the deficit. And I think the Chinese are wise in not just sticking to that. When necessary, they can surpass that, as you say now.
Yes,
But
yes.
how would they do that now?
China will issue some long-term loans on the market to collect the funds, and then Chinese central government will use these new funds to help local government to pay back their debt, to improve their fiscal position. Then, as Chinese economy depends much more on the local level, on the provincial level. So if local government, if provincial government can improve their public fiscal position, so they will be better off in their position, and they will be able to trigger another round of investments in a lot of sectors, especially in sectors like the Chinese government have given a certain orientation, such as we call it new productive forces. So a combination of new technology to revise and to renovate industrial equipments.
Yeah, there is also a focus on like this is a short term dealing with the economic slowdown, so called. Is they also it will reinvigorate the real estate market, encourage people to buy houses, uh,
Yes, yes.
and
No, not
new
only
construction.
encourage people to buy houses, that will allow those local governments sometimes in some cases to take over those real estate houses and to transform those railways property into a sort of public goods and to offer to people with a sort of social housing.
Yes.
To take all these like a social housing, because in
Mhm.
China we still have a proportion of people who have a moderate revenue, so who cannot afford to buy a luxury or something expensive housing. And then local government will offer the kind of housing as a public goods. And then they will pay a symbolic rent, you know.
Right. But
They will,
the
it's kind of social housing in recent years. Chinese government had built a lot of social housings to allow those moderate people to have access to a convenient living standard,
yeah.
while their moderate revenue cannot afford allow them to have these kind of conditions.
Yeah.
And then that improve people's life, and secondly, that will enhance their consuming power. And then that will trigger more consumption in Chinese market. And that's why the housing market could be both ameliorated by people's consuming powers recovery, but also by local government's intervention in the market.
Yeah, there's also is that related to the also attempt to increase the consumption portion of the economy. We know that the Chinese people are averse to spending and more pro saving. People, the Chinese people have and it's a healthy aspect. They save a lot, and there is
Uh-huh.
a large savings portion. But they also so the government is trying to stimulate internal consumption. Uh,
Uh-huh.
as a way of, as I have heard, of mitigating the shortfall of the, for example, exports to certain consumer markets in China, in the
Yes,
United
yes.
States and Europe.
But fortunately, in China, we are in a sort of turning point because, for example, a new model of consumption is emerging in China, such as we are replacing our traditional cars with electric vehicles, so currently in China, as we are facing a new situation with the coming of a lot of new products, new energy vehicles is only one of these. There is a lot of things, even in terms of smartphone. So we have better and better model of smartphones. So people have to change their smartphone to catch up with this new technology, new model, because currently smartphone is not only a telephone, it's everything, like a new energy vehicle. New energy vehicle is not only a car. It's a sort of moving terminal of internet. You have everything within a car. So that's why people are tempted by these kind of new products. They are replacing their old cars with new model of new energy vehicles, and they are replacing their smartphone, new model of tablets. All these things happened in China, so that will enlarge China's domestic consumption market. That will play a very important role in supporting Chinese economic growth.
Yeah. There's we have a bit of course, the China's consumption part of the economy is still very small compared to the Western. The problem is that we have too much focus on consumption in our economies in the West. And in China, of course, on the short term, it's fine to increase the consumption because it's disproportionate to China's economic might. But consumption is not the solution on the long term for economic problems. This is something which you also discuss in your book, Professor. But China is a manufacturing economy, and it's export oriented. And therefore, the importance is that to modernize and improve the production capacity of the Chinese system, which is advancing incredibly fast. But it's also dependent on the growth and stability in the global markets, which China is exporting to. So how is the Chinese leadership thinking about this challenge?
Actually, if you look at Chinese GDP's composition, the export contributes a lot to Chinese GDP growth, for sure. So China's export still plays a very important role in promoting Chinese economic growth. While the difference is that previously, China's export were mainly focused on either European market or American market. So alternatively, European Union or the United States used to be China's biggest exporting market for quite a long time. But since almost 8 to 10 years, things started changing slightly. But until there is 2 years, until 2023, for example, in 2023, we noticed that there is a big change in China's trading structure, for example. Previously, our bilateral trade with the United States account for more than 20% of Chinese total international trade. While this proportion lowered down to 11.3% or something like that. So slightly higher than 11%. While our trade with European Union was as high as more than 20%. Well, today, our trade position or bilateral trade with European Union was only 13.6%. So not very important. Put together, our trade with the United States and Europe represent only less than 1/4 of Chinese international trade, while our trade with so-called Belt and Road countries, let alone Global South, with Belt and Road countries rose to more than 43% to 44%. And especially with China's increasing investment in a lot of countries, in Gulf countries, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in United Arab Emirates, in all these countries, especially in ASEAN countries, in Southeastern Asian countries. And then our trade with all these countries is growing very, very fast. That's why our biggest trading partner is no longer the United States or European Union, is ASEAN. For success, consequently, it's our 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years, ASEAN used to be China's biggest trading partner now. That's a big change. That's why, despite the tariff war that President Trump have launched again, actually, since his first administration, he launched this trade war with China, and then Biden administration didn't change anything. He maintained the tariffs against Chinese export. Well, when Donald Trump came again to the White House, he launched again, he raised again on the basis of 20%. He said, I will add 10% more tariffs on Chinese export. It means that China suffered more than 30% of tariffs on our export to the US market. But that posed a lot of trouble in US economy because in the consuming market previously, in 2006, 2008, even after the 2008 financial crisis, the United States accounted much on Chinese cheap goods to bring down the inflation. Otherwise, their monetary policy will trigger a tremendous inflationist pressure. So, and hopefully, as they imported a lot of consuming goods from China, so they can maintain the consuming prices at appropriate level somehow.
Yeah, this is a very paradoxical situation because I don't know if President Trump or his advisors know what they are doing. Because the last time the first Trump administration, I was looking at some of the numbers because I was writing an article of the impact. Who will the tariffs will impact most? And you look at how much American farmers lost last.
Yes.
They lost $27 billion in market share in China for the soybean, for the beef,
Yes.
and not only that, I was looking at the American agricultural machine production, and they are very worried. They had a report which says even the American Corn Growers Association, before the elections, they warned that new tariffs will affect the American farmers. But not only that, it will affect the agricultural machinery producers like John Deere, which is very popular. That's because China did impose retaliatory tariffs on the agricultural machinery of the United States.
Yes.
The difference is that China has an alternative. China can replace these with Chinese produced. And then China can replace American soybean and beef with Brazilian, Argentinian, and so. So the only losers are actually the American producers, and on the same time, American consumers, especially low-income people, because a lot of their income goes to consumption. They don't have anything. And Chinese cheap, affordable goods are important for the low-income population of the United States. And now they are being punished by the by the Trump administration and creating a big crisis in society. Also, the farmers were important voters for Trump, actually.
Mhm.
The vote for Trump in the rural areas was very big, and he promised the American farmers they will have a golden age. But now it looks like farmers will be suffering in the United States because of that policy. The difference today is that China not only can replace American advanced technologies and machinery, it can also find other sources for its consumer market of food, for example, in the global
Mhm.
south. And this is something people around Trump probably haven't thought about because they are blinded by the arrogance that they are the best. And this
Mhm.
is creating a big problem. But still, the United States is an important market for China. It's an important partner because China also imports advanced technology.
Yes, China is the biggest, almost the biggest buyer of American grains, soybean, and so on and so forth, coins, and so, in those sectors. And then, because of the tariff war, and China declined or China reduced exposure to American grains so that American farmers cannot sell their production to China. And then some of them went bankrupt because within the state they have system. If the farmers cannot support their exploitation fees, so they can went bankrupt, so they don't pay their credit to banks and so on and so forth. That would trigger a financial crisis. And for that purpose, the U.S. government was forced to subsidy to subsidy U.S. farmers through these programs. So they are losing Chinese market. They have to subsidy their farmers. So all in all, they have to pay more for this kind of tariff war. And then, more as you just point out, American farmers depends on import from China of a lot of agricultural machine. They are imported. They used to import tractors, combined all of these things from China because the price of Chinese machines is only one third, not only half of the price of American-made machines. So the American farmer just make short video to diffuse by YouTube. He said that even with 20 or 25% of tariffs, I will still buy Chinese-made machines because it's still cheaper and it's well conceived because Chinese machines, to some extent, the American farmer just shows the different performance of Chinese machines compared to American machines. Chinese machines is is more recent. It's more sophisticated with new technology, with so it shows better performance in different aspects. So the American farmers said that I prefer, even with tariffs, continue to buy made in China machines. So
Yeah.
in these purposes, that cannot help American farmers to better off with tariff war. Instead, the American government will pay more American farmers by subsidizing their cost of exploitation, and they cannot continue to sell to Chinese market. They have to stock their grains, and the stock will cause a lot of cost also.
Mm.
So
Right.
that all in all, they will lose a lot of profits.
True. Yeah, this is quite a dilemma for
Mhm.
the Trump administration because on the one hand they play this populistic policy, and on the other hand there is a reality on the ground which tells them the effect is negative. And
Mhm.
this is one thing you discuss in your book, Professor, is the developed countries' dilemma. If they don't participate in globalization,
Mhm.
they will lose the
They will lose their competitive edge, and then they will fall into a sort of underdevelopment.
yeah, and there's a rising developing sector in the world, and they will lose the benefits of working with the developing sector in the global
Mhm.
south, for example.
Mhm.
And if they engage into the globalization, because of
Mhm.
the discrepancies that have been created in the past decades, is that you
Mhm.
have a very enormous financial market, but very
Mhm.
low productivity, and the production is dominated by the transnational conglomerates who have made a lot of
Yes.
money from globalization, but it has not benefited the general economies of the
The
EU.
wealth created by globalization has not been fairly redistributed among American society. So
Yeah,
only a small proportion of these financial elites benefited greatly from the globalization. Or
exactly.
many
And they are not, they have relocated the industries from the United States and the EU to other parts of the world.
yes.
But now here comes the interesting question, because China, and you mentioned the fact that China is diversifying its markets, and it's now the Belt and Road countries, which are, more than two-thirds of the world nations. China's trade with them and economic cooperation with them is much larger than with the advanced sector or the previously industrialized countries. But also, China is not, and this is something which one is a bit double edged, because Chinese companies, what they're doing also, they are locating production outside. But it's not
Mhm.
simply, I mean, there are cheap products, consumer products being located in Africa, in West Asia, but also you have advanced industries also being located in other parts of the world. For example, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Recently, the Chinese computer producer Lenovo
Mhm.
just opened a plant in Saudi Arabia to produce laptops, tablets, and other computer systems. So this is just one example. In Egypt, there are lots of Chinese industries opening up. But the thing
Yes.
is that the global south, these Belt and Road countries, are both increasing in income, but also in their ambition to also become industrial countries. And China is sharing that. But what is the difference between that and what the multinational American and European companies outsourcing their production to, for example, China, Southeast Asia before?
Mhm. Well, I think that there is some similar logic behind all these, but the ultimate goal, the purpose is totally different. While when China's enterprises are going out to help to install their production capacities in those countries, intentionally we will help those countries to get industrialized. We think that we should share our experience with those global South countries. Our purpose is that to create a wealth beyond China. And then, if that's Chinese philosophy, for thousands of years, China used to be a Confucian country. Well, for Confucius said previously, more than 2,500 years ago, if you want to get wealthier, better get your neighbors wealthier also. And then you can get wealthier with each other. So that's the conception. That's the conception. So we will make everyone more development. The development should be based upon industrialization. That's why in 2016, the year where China was the host country of the G20 summit in Hangzhou. So Hangzhou becomes a famous city nowadays because of deep sea, because of the Chinese human-shaped robot, because of all these. Hangzhou is a very innovative city. Well, in 2016, we all decided to host the G20 summit in Hangzhou. And in 2016, we already show at the moment of the G20 summit a lot of technology projects. Hangzhou is the only Chinese city where the whole city is covered by free Wi-Fi. And Hangzhou is the city where Alibaba is located, where we have a lot of no man's store, no man's hotel, no man's a lot of things happened in Hangzhou. So in 2016, at the summit of G20, China had some item, at some agenda, because as you are the host country of the G20, you have the right to put some into the agenda to debate with those other leaders of the G20. So China put into the agenda the industrialization of Africa and the least developed country in the world. Up until 2016, G20 leaders always debate their domestic issues. They represent almost the world because put together, G20 represents some more than 80% of global GDP. So it's already tremendous. But nonetheless, before 2016, they only discussed issues about themselves, not other economy. There is still 20% of global economy which is not taken into account. So China proposed to debate the issue of these 20% of global economy in Hangzhou in 2016. And the purpose is to help those countries get industrialized. The topic of discussion is industrialization of Africa and the least developed countries. Since then, China continued to propose to help the issue of these global South countries' industrialization debated in every international forum. So that's how it's not only a matter of Chinese enterprises, it's a political agenda proposed by Chinese government.
This is a very, very important point because, people have to pay attention to this discussion, the difference between the previous globalization of the multinational companies from the US and the EU outsourcing to, to make profit. Chinese globalization is different in the sense that it is industrializing other nations, making them wealthier. And one of the methods used is, of course, through the Belt and Road Initiative. China has been building infrastructure. The multinationals who went out of the US and EU to global South, for cheap labor, they did not build infrastructure. They did not build railways, power plants, roads, and so on. So this is the very crucial difference between the Chinese globalization and the previous globalization, which you actually in your book you make very, very clear distinctions between these different types of globalizations, and I think it's very important for people to understand this thing. Also, there is the question of long-term thinking. The previous globalization was more interested in short-term profits, and the more profit you show, the more your stocks go up in the stock market, and you can make more money in the financial markets than in production. So a lot of what you call the false prosperity in the West is that a lot of that prosperity is based on financial gains in the financial markets, and then they try to translate it into gains in the real economy. But the real economy is not growing. It's the financial economy. The money is growing, but the real economy is not growing in the West.
Mhm.
And this is a very important distinction, which you point out in your book. But so that the contrast between short-term gains.
Mhm.
I mean, we discussed the fact that the Chinese leadership is thinking about the short-term situation, trying to
Mhm.
mitigate the short-term, but they
Mhm.
never forget the long-term
Yes.
policy. And the
Mhm.
long-term policy is at least until 2049. uh, but you have
Yes.
stepping stones. This year we have the uh, Made in China 2025. China has
Yes.
accomplished that with, enormous success by building a compact industrial system, which we would like to discuss now, Professor, soon.
Mhm.
But also, you have 2035 and then you have 2049. And
Mhm.
to reach that, China needs a stable world economy to reach. So this is the idea of common prosperity, as you said, Confucian idea
Yes.
is
Yes.
that China will not manage its goals if the rest of the world is going down. So it's in
Mhm.
the interest of China that the rest of the world is prosperous. And this is a huge
Yes.
difference in the philosophy, which people
Mhm.
don't really understand. And it's a practically scientifically can be proven that
Mhm.
this is a much better system than beggaring your neighbor in a
Mhm.
certain way. But the long term development processes in the real economy are very important, and you take that up in your book. I would like to uh, take a portion from your book. You warn, and this is very interesting in China. You, as an expert, actually, the government listens to you and other experts. But you, in your book, you warn against this uh, old type of globalization, and you warn the Chinese government or the Chinese leadership from falling into the same pitfalls. And you say there in chapter 7 on the crisis of globalization, you say, as I quote, as long as China sticks to and improves its own system and does not blindly follow it, its economy will be able to grow better after the crisis is over. So you warn the government that it should not just follow this idea of these short-term uh, gains, but should
Mhm.
think long-term. But then you also add, uh, you give some advice where you say it's I'm quoting this because this is exactly what the Chinese government is doing. But you have proposed this earlier. You say, quote, the Chinese system should attract more technical talents to China, make
Mhm.
China a happy land for technology development, and make the Chinese market a fertile ground for new technology growth.
Mhm.
Uh, so you talk about a scientific measurement of how Chinese industrial system has evolved and
Mhm.
should be maintained. And you say that there's a measurement which the United Nations uses, which divides the industrial manufacturing into 39 major categories,
Mhm.
191 medium categories, and 525 small categories. China is the first country in the world to have a complete industrial system according to the UN standards. The complete system allows manufacturing companies in China to easily realize a wide range of complementarity work and find a variety of complementarity products and components, saving a lot of time and effort. This advantage will allow China to attract more innovative companies to invest in the coming period. This is very, very important. Uh, End of quote, of course. This is from your book, chapter 7. I think this is exactly what the Chinese government, I suspect, is doing, is this high quality productive forces idea, which was released uh, 2 years ago, is this is what a compact industrial system is China is building. And it's
Mhm.
so large, it's so enormous, but also so well integrated and so advanced, it's almost waterproof. And that not only there is no challenger in the world, but also it's very beneficial for the world because it can both
Yes.
use effectively for the rest of the world, but also attract technological progress and innovative companies and technologies from around the world. And
Mhm.
that's why Chinese market is so attractive for investment. So how do you see this going into the future? Because as you said, China shares its fruits of the progress with other nations.
Yes, you just point out the importance of Chinese complexity of this industrial system. The Chinese, according to the United Nations criteria, China is the first one, is until now is the only one that could meet all these criteria. Those kind of complexity is very useful in case of emergency. For example, when the COVID happened in the world, all of a sudden, we need tremendous masks. We need a lot of protections, even for nucleic acid test materials. So, and China becomes only one. I remember that the governor of California once is debated with the governor of New Mexico and said that because at that time, every state, not the federal state, so the American government sent a special envoy to China looking for mask provision. And then every state sent their representative to China to looking for mask provision for everything. And then the famous New York State governor just say to TV that what happens in China? We meet every representative of every state. Oh, not only the state of the United States, from every all these United States, but also from Korea, from Japan, from Europe, from every country. She said, why things happen this way? But in China, we didn't have those industrial capacity of making all these masks. But as China have a complete system of industrial production, so they manage to set up a new line of mask production within 3 days. Many where in China, they can set up a chain of production. Same for ventilators. When the patient becomes seriously affected, you need some new equipment, ventilators, to save their life. And then that was still China who provided all these tens of thousands of ventilators to the United States, to Europe, to the global market. And then that not because we have this capacity, but we have set up those chain of production over 3 days. And then you can continue to produce all these things to meet the global market needs. So that's China's contribution to those kind of contaminants, contagions, sickness in the world. The other example of how China have this kind of industrial age is you can have a better conception for a lot of sophisticated product. If you don't have this complete industrial capacity, you cannot produce this. I have a good friend who is an investor, so he invested in a lot of countries, and who used to be a very important investor in a American tech company in California, in Silicon Valley. Once his partners told him that they are ready to propose a new product, a new technology product. They will make a prototype, they will try to test the prototype, but it will take 6 months. So my friend asked them, why you need so long a time, 6 months for these? They say that we have to import some pieces from Germany, some pieces from Korea, some pieces from China, some pieces from Japan, and so on and so forth. With all these together, we will put 6 months to make all these happen. And my friend said that better to move all your teams to Shenzhen. You know, Shenzhen in the south of China. So it's the most complex manufacturing city in the world nowadays. It's a symbol of advanced manufacturing sector in the world. So he brought all these teams to Shenzhen. Guess what? In 2 weeks, they find everything in Shenzhen. They put them together. They make their first prototype. 2 weeks against 6 months. If in Silicon Valley, you have to put 6 months to make a real prototype for a new product, while in Shenzhen, you need only 2 weeks to make it happen. That's the importance of complexity of your system industrial.
Yeah. That's very, very fascinating because so in China, you have built the capacity where you can, every component you need exists
Yes.
inside the country. Every technology, every kind of material you need for any industrial new product you have. Also, you have a very efficient and compact transportation system. So because these parts are not produced in one city in China, they are produced in all over China, which is a huge country. But you can, within 24 hours, get whatever you want. Because of the high rail system, the integrated air transport system. So it's a very compact and very efficient system of industrial production of scientific. But now, with the introduction of these new technologies like AI and robotics, things will be even more advanced and things. I mean, people talk about AI in terms of the open source kind of information provider, but AI in industrial processes and technology is completely different also, because the efficiency in industrial production will increase by leaps and bounds. People don't talk about that. They talk about how much information you can get through AI. But what is neglected is actually the use of AI in industrial processes, exactly as you use robotics in industrial processes, so that you can speed up the production capacity and efficiency by orders of magnitude rather than using that. So this is I guess where China is heading. And so not only that it produces 35% of the world manufacturing, it will maybe even increase that, but it would use modern technologies and completely different set of know-how than we experience today. So this is a fascinating. There is I mean, we have taken almost 1 hour now. There's so much to discuss, but I think we covered a very important. But I would like to give you the chance also to, in your book, you discuss the final chapters. Where is globalization going? And you talk a lot about how important it is to have a normal relationship, to establish a normal relationship to the United States, United States, China, EU. We in the Belt and Road Institute, we have also what we call Europeans for the Belt and Road, that it's very important for the EU countries to work with China. But what are the mechanisms? You make some proposals in your book how they can coexist, and that a future globalization, which is different than the globalization which we have experienced so far, could be helpful. So what you were proposing?
Yes, actually, we consider that our relationship with the United States will be how to qualify these kind of relationships. It might be at the same time conflictual, competitive, but also competitive. I like to call these kind of situation comparative. It's both competitive and cooperative. It's, so if you combine these two objectives together,
Yes.
competitive, cooperative, it makes comparative.
Instead
In
of
some
zero sum, it
sectors,
is,
we may compete.
yes.
Competition is not, by definition, is not a bad word. Because if we all wanted to implement, for example, market economy, it's because market is a mechanism of competition. The competition is core idea of the market. That's why we have regulated the market with anti-dumping law, with antitrust law, with all these trusts, because we want to maintain a sort of competition in the market. So the competition will stimulate people's incentives. So we will try to better ourselves. That's the meaning of competition. Within the competition, you will better yourself, try to perform better than your competitor. So in the world market, in the global market, if China can compete healthily with the United States, uh, other countries, the global market will benefit from this kind of healthy competition between China and the United States. Well, to solve all problems, only competition cannot make everything happen. So we need cooperation because we are facing some common challenges, climate change and so on and so forth. A lot of things happen in the world that is beyond one country's capacity. We need a cooperation. If China and the United States can find a way of cooperation to face up to these kind of global challenges, and the global world can solve this problem much more easily. So I think that that's the idea behind the called comparative
Yeah.
relationship between China and the United States.
Yeah. I
Uh,
think you use the term variable sum game instead of zero sum.
yes,
It's
yes.
variable sum game.
Because in the serious game,
Mm.
there is not only non zero sum game.
Yeah,
There
there's
is
a
also
winner and loser.
variable.
There is either winner or
Yes, there
loser.
is a variable sum game.
Yeah.
In case of a variable sum game, it means that if you change your mindset, if you try to find a solution with your partner, with your adversary, even sometimes you can find a better solution than only by confronting your partner or your adversary. So that's why I propose to think twice about our confrontation, and then instead of continue to confront on everything, we can find a way to get our war better out.
Yeah, exactly. This is we have so many challenges. Though, for example, here in Europe, everybody is complaining about and worried about immigration from Africa, but nobody's discussing how Africa can develop.
Yes.
So people can stay in their countries. People don't voluntarily leave their country. They are forced to leave their country because of certain economic, political, and other reasons, seeking a
Yes.
better life. And if we don't develop Africa, we will have to face the fallback, the
Mhm.
fallout of this policy. And China is doing its best to help in Africa, and Europe, the EU should join China in Africa, not try to, impede its progress in
Yes.
Africa. We also have this because we have in the West we have had for many years, decades, this sense that, oh, we have reached the end of technological and scientific progress, economic progress. We need to slow down now. And because they're only looking at their own situation, and we are actually going backwards. But the rest of the world has not developed so much. There's still poverty in the world. There are other
Yes.
problems. And
Mhm.
despite all the development that China has achieved, you are saying we are still at the beginning of the journey. we have
Mhm.
we have not reached the end. So there is no end for human progress. It can
No,
change
no,
in
not
quality,
yet. Look
Yeah.
at what happened in China. Look at what happened in China. We made the target for China's scientific and technology development made in China 2025. It's a plan of scientific and technology development for 10 years. So this year, 2025, is the last year. That's why since the end of last year and beginning this year, we have witnessed emergence of so many new technologies in China.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
many. DeepSeek is only one of these, a small proportion of these that shocked the US stock market. And
Right.
then the other technology this year, we will see a lot of new technology appear.
Mhm.
So, and then that's a start in Chinese windows, we would like to say. That's a beginning of a Chinese technology innovation journey, like you say. We will continue. This year, we will have defined another 10 years of scientific technology development. We didn't nominate it, we didn't define it, but we will make it happen. So,
That's
and then we will make something like 2035. You mentioned 2049, but we have something for 2025,
a stepping
then for
stone.
2035,
Yeah.
then for 2030, 49. So
Yes.
all these will happen one after another. Then we
Yes.
will go in that direction steadily, but we will find a solution to overcome those technology barriers.
Yeah. And the world have to realize that we can benefit from that progress in China, but we have to
Of
keep pace with
course,
it.
of
Yeah.
course.
Well, Professor Ding, it's very pleasant talking to you and very informative. I'm sure we will have other opportunities to talk again, but I think this was very fascinating and it shows the roadmap where things are going, but also the people
Mhm,
around the world need to pay attention to this
mhm.
development and try to benefit from it so we can have a world of prosperity and peace
Thank
among
you,
people.
Dr. Ascari, for the invitation, for talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Mhm.